What's up everyone, this is Q from Retro Q Gaming, and this video is a follow-up to one I made previously. If you haven't checked that one out, I'll have a link to it in the description below. It was my original video about the state of the current gen consoles and the remasters that are just poorly rushed out. But in my original video, I talked, mostly the video was focused on Borderlands Handsome Collection on Xbox One and PS4. Which took Borderlands 2 and Borderlands the pre-sequel and remastered them from the Xbox 360 and PS3 and put them onto the PS4 and Xbox One, mostly trying to do 1080p 60 FPS. My original video at the time was based on version 1.00 and 1.01, which was obviously the day one patch, because the games did come out actually 2 months ago today. Well, in America it was 2 months ago today. It was basically 2 months ago altogether. It came out towards the end of March, and the games themselves had a huge day one patch. Now that patch wasn't just for performance and bug fixes, but it was for a bunch of other stuff as well, DLC and all that kind of shit. So I mean, this is a game that released 2 months ago and had a roughly 16 gigabyte day one patch that varied on Xbox One and PS4, but the Xbox One version was a 16 gig day one patch. So fast forward about 2 months ish, and on May 20th they released another patch, and this patch was a pretty big one as well. It was a roughly 9 gig patch. So depending on the console, there's reports of it being 7.7 gig for the Xbox One and 9 gig on the PS4. So the main thing that this has done is, okay, it got rid of a bunch of issues and bug fixes, but there was also some really heavy improvements on the tech and the optimization in there as well. So the main thing about it was the fact that they were remastered and sold as a 1080p 60 FPS experience originally. The base game and the very first 1.01 patch, that it did not deliver on 1080p 60 FPS. I go into detail on it on my description, on my video I made previously in the description below, but the main thing is it did not deliver on 1080p 60 FPS. Apparently a lot of it hovered constantly under 60 FPS, and then during, you know, firefights, even small firefights or bigger firefights, it dropped even further. But apparently with the new 1.02 patch, I knew this had come out, and I was waiting to see some reviews on the actual patch, performance wise and all. This new patch drastically improves the quality of the game for both PS4 and Xbox One. A lot of the time it's basically graphics and all are still the same. They haven't changed any of that really, but the main things is that now 1080p 60 FPS on both consoles is almost guaranteed the entire time. There is sections during small firefights where the frame rate will drop small amounts, and when I say small amounts, it's reported to drop single digits, not 2 single digits. It just drops in single digits, so it drops from like 60 to 58 to 55. There's minuscule amounts of screen tearing, I believe, because they still do operate with a VSync enabled, but the main thing is that the frame rate drops are, one, far less severe in amount of frame drops and screen tears, and two, they're far less often. So now I know some people, because of the hardware and all, the Xbox One is generally, well, not so much anymore these days because there's been some big improvements, but generally the Xbox One can be slightly less powerful and slightly worse performance, but again, it does come in at minuscule amounts of performance under it. But yes, the Xbox One will keep 1080p 60 FPS most of the time as well after this 1.02 patch. So because of this patch, like I said, on the Xbox One and PS4, they will both keep 60 FPS a lot of the time. They will both drop small amounts, and because of that, very less tearing, a lot less tearing compared to the original release in the patch. So that's nice. That's very nice. Unfortunately, it's not a completely positive video. It is positive for a couple of reasons, but I've gone over that. Now, the problem is this being a trend. I mean, yeah, you could argue that, I personally will argue that they rushed out the game, because when it released, there was no big games really out. It was fairly sparse. So because Borderlands is such a popular franchise, if they could just get that out in a quiet time, it would get a lot of sales, because everyone would be bored and no one would have anything to play. People would be wanting to upgrade the Borderlands, or people would want to be getting into Borderlands for the first time, and this would be a good way in. And because of that, I feel they rushed it out a bit early. For the simple reason is, if they had held on for another month or two, let's say 2, because it's basically 2 months since release, and they had released the game in the current state, these issues wouldn't have been around at all. I mean, they would have released as a highly praised version of the game, as opposed to something that got slammed performance-wise originally. So it's unfortunate that developers have to do this, and they feel like they have to do this, and publishers are making it happen, but it's worrying. On the plus side, the fact that it is happening and the games are being patched and made better is promising, and that is a good thing for the people who bought the games, or the people who want to buy the games and were put off by the performance. But at the same time, it's a bad thing that it's actually happening. I mean, I'll say it again. If it will put people off pre-ordering, I hope. I'm appealing to people to put off pre-ordering games because of shit like this. Publishers make developers hit deadlines, and because of that, games usually suffer on launch. I mean, there's too many games to count at this point, but I'm sure everyone has an individual game that comes to memory that they've bought on day one, possibly pre-ordered, but bought on day one, and it was just a wreck. And in the odd chance you haven't, I'm sure you've heard all the stories: the Assassin's Creeds, the Watch Dogs, the Master Chief collections, the Borderlands collections. There's too many to count at this point, but I'll just leave it there. So anyway, let me know in the comment section below about your whole opinion on Borderlands being upgraded, and the whole thing with them being fixed and broken in general, and released and patched later. So let me know all that. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You can follow me on Twitter, because I got a new little series starting up in exactly a week. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the rest of the videos in my channel.